guys, it's Allie, and this is Lucy, my parents' new little puppy, and today we are going to be talking about bad writing advice. Lucy has decided to join us for now. We'll see how long this lasts. Let me start off by saying that it takes pretty specific criteria to make me think that something is a bad piece of writing advice. Just because something's not for you doesn't mean that it is inherently bad, in the same way that just because something is for you doesn't mean that it is inherently perfect. So for me to consider something a bad piece of writing advice, it needs to, 1, treat itself like the be-all end-all, that it will work for everybody, and if only everybody did this, they'd all be perfect writers, and 2, to treat writers who don't use this tip or this strategy, to treat those writers as if they are lesser than in some way, to discredit writers who don't use this specific tip. And so the piece of writing advice that we're going to be talking about today is the very misguided advice that writer's block doesn't actually exist, and it is just a symptom of a lazy writer. And really all you need to do to get past writer's block is to just pull yourself up by your bootstraps and tell yourself that you have to do it. And that's it. That's what they say writing requires. To be clear, I don't think that everybody who has ever given this advice or taken this advice is inherently bad or that they're saying this stuff maliciously, but I do think that it is a very flawed argument, and I think it is a very flawed piece of advice. So just because you feel this way and this works for you doesn't mean it's going to work for everybody, and it's not fair to treat it like something that is going to work for every single person, and if it doesn't, that it just makes them lazy. That's not fair, that's not true, and yes, of course writer's block does exist. I hate when writers say that writer's block doesn't exist, because it does. It takes many forms, and we'll talk about those forms in a second, but just because you are maybe able to pick yourself up and do it doesn't mean that every single person is going to have that same experience, and that their bouts of writer's block are always going to have one singular cause. So with that said, let's move on into kind of what writer's block is, because it does exist, and how you can maybe take actual steps to getting over it, including but not limited to just trying to push through it. Are you gonna go? Okay. Oh, there she goes. The way I see it, writer's block has 3 primary forms, and the first of those is what a lot of writers who do give this flawed writing advice are insinuating, which is that sometimes you're just lazy and you don't feel like doing it, and for some that is a hard pill to swallow, but for others it's just kind of the name of the game. Some days you just don't feel like writing and you don't have a reason for it, it's just you don't feel like it, and that's going to happen sometimes. You are allowed to give yourself those days if you so choose. It doesn't mean that you are a lazy person or that you're a lazy writer or that you're doing a disservice to yourself or to your story if you take a couple days off now and then. But as the part where that is going to start devolving and getting worse is when that one day or maybe a couple of days turns into months, to years, to a decade of not working on your story and not writing for no other reason than that you just didn't really feel like it. That shows that you might not really care about this particular story, so maybe you should either reassess your own personal priorities, or you should consider maybe looking at another project to work on for a bit and let this one sit for a bit. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's not to say that you are a lazy person and that you're a terrible person. It just means that you might want to either consider stepping into a new project, or maybe try to set up some self-motivators for yourself to help keep you on track. Nothing wrong with a little bit of laziness now and again. The second cause of writer's block, in my opinion, is a little bit more complicated, and that is creative burnout. And I mentioned a little bit about creative burnout in my video post NaNoWriMo this past year, so I will leave that linked in a little info card above. But the main point is that your creative energy or mind is very much like any other kind of muscle in your body. So when you are working a muscle, you are growing and developing that muscle. You're getting better, you're making progress, and that's great. But if you overwork that muscle, then you are going to feel discomfort, even sometimes pain, and in some cases, it's going to actually put you out of commission for a couple of days, and you're going to take a step back in that progress that you made beforehand. And so the same thing can happen in your story. If you have been working nonstop on this story for like 12 days, writing 10,000 words a day, and one day you just open up your document and the words aren't coming, you might have just kind of overstepped your limits for this little period of time. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. The best thing to do in that situation, in my experience, is to let yourself take a break. Let your mind rest, and you might actually have some great ideas for the story when you do so. So as long as you are still thinking about your story and maybe adding in a couple little lines here and there, you are allowed to take a step back and to not let the writer's block take over, but to kind of go with the flow and let yourself take a bit of a break, let yourself regain some of that muscle's strength, and then you're going to feel much more energized and ready to go when the inspiration does hit and you're able to continue going from then on. And the final form of writer's block, as far as this video is concerned, is the unfortunate circumstance where your instincts as a reader or as a writer are conflicting with your control as the writer of this particular story. What I mean by that is that if you are in a position in your story where there is a little voice in the back of your head telling you that this plotline is going all wrong, this character is pointless, why is this character even in here, and oh, I've messed up my main character's motivations, oh, I need to make the antagonist more influential in the story, and all of those things are happening all at once, this might be so overwhelming that it makes you want to stop and lets you kind of give in to this whole writer's block that you're experiencing. And this is kind of the worst writer's block to experience because it is more than just, I'm tired or I don't feel like doing it today. It goes down deep into the actual bones of your story and to the core of you as a writer. And the answer to how to overcome this is so much more complicated than just pick yourself up and do it. It is really hard to decide, and a lot of times it's going to depend on your specific story. So if you are feeling this way on the last chapter of your book, you might just be like, you know what, I'm just going to finish this draft and then I'm going to make notes of all of these changes that I have in mind and then I'm going to keep going. You might be having this thought halfway into the book, and at that point you might be able to come up with ways to alter the story and shift it in a direction and continue on with your draft. There are a bunch of ways where the writing advice of just do it is going to work for you in this situation. But it is also completely valid for you to take a look at all of these things and decide, you know what, I need to take a step back, I need to re-outline, I need to, or if you're a pantser, maybe you just need to outline ahead of time before going into the next draft, and just take a break, think about the story, and decide if I like where it's going or if I want to take it in a new direction, either now or in the next draft. And give yourself that time. If that still doesn't work, then you might want to actually go back and look at your previous couple chapters or just read the whole draft as it exists right now. A lot of times people will argue against that, especially in a fast drafting, because you don't really want to look back at your previous stuff. You want to just keep continuing forward. But in a case like this, I would say that it is totally okay to take a look back. And you might also decide that you want to have someone else look at it, maybe a friend or a fellow writer, or if you are considering self-publishing, or if you just, have some money to throw around, you could hire a developmental editor to go through and help you really figure out where this story is going to go and where you should take it in this or in following drafts. And maybe that'll work for you, maybe it won't. If you don't want to show your story to anybody before it's absolutely perfect, then you can also do this yourself by looking back, going back, taking notes to yourself, and then allowing yourself to move forward. That's totally okay. It is a bummer because it means that this draft is going to take a lot longer for you than you anticipated, but sometimes it's necessary and sometimes it's also not. So I can't give you one piece of advice, because that would be going against everything that I said at the beginning of this video. But you really just need to decide for yourself when you're in this kind of writer's block. It's the absolute worst. I've experienced it very recently. I will leave a link above so you can hear my sad tale. But it's totally okay to go through it as well, and you can decide as the writer, because you do have good instincts, what you want to do with that story. All of that being said, I hope that this video has maybe debunked this pretty commonly circulated myth that writer's block doesn't exist, or some people don't say it doesn't exist, but they're like, writer's block isn't really writer's block. You have full control. It's a lie. It's a lie. It's not true. And if you are somebody who has either given this advice or given into this advice before, which I definitely have, there was a time where I was like, yeah, if I don't do it, I'm just lazy, and that's not true. So I hope that for those of you, or for those of you who have never heard of this piece of advice before, I hope that this video has given you some better, more helpful, and maybe mentally healthier ways of dealing with writer's block, which definitely does exist, in your own stories and in your own writing life and journey. So if you like this video, do give it a like, and if you like my content, do subscribe. I make videos every single Friday, and leave in the comments below what is the worst piece of writing advice you have ever received or given, if the case may be. I want to hear, because I like laughing at them, and who knows, maybe we'll turn this into a series where I talk about bad writing advice and then give some better alternatives. So that is it for me. I will see you all in the next video. Bye-bye.